You all know T-Rex, Triceratops, and that guy with plates on his back, but they only became stars because they looked good on movie posters and their bones were better preserved than those of hundreds of other species. In reality, the world of dinosaurs was much tougher and stranger than you might imagine. There were herbivores that killed small animals for some reason. There were predators that drowned their prey in rivers. And there were creatures so distorted that paleontologists couldn't figure out which side their heads were on. But perhaps the worst shit, in the literal sense, is that some dinosaurs destroyed the planet's atmosphere with their farts more than all of human industry does today. And the most shocking thing is that everything I just said is the fucking truth. We'll start with dinosaurs, which we, well, to put it mildly, didn't understand. Iguanodon was the first major breakthrough in paleontology, and the first major failure. In the 19th century, paleontologists attached its finger to its nose, and scientists really thought they had discovered a unicorn. Iguanodon itself was depicted as massive and clumsy, like an elephant, but it was the first attempt to depict a dinosaur in its natural size. Over time, its visual reconstruction was corrected, and it became quite popular in pop culture. When we finally found out what it really looked like, it turned out to be a rather boring dinosaur, just a large herbivore without even a horn on its head. However, Iguanodon was one of the first dinosaurs to be scientifically described, and it was through him that we could observe how science itself invented dinosaurs over the decades. But that was just the beginning. If everything started with Iguanodon, then science confidently moved on to fantasizing. Take Stegosaurus, for example. It had one anatomical feature, a very small brain. Therefore, sometime in the 19th century, someone claimed that it must have had a second brain located in its butt. The story about the brain in the butt became so viral that even leading dinosaur experts still repeat it, although in reality, it was most likely just a nerve node. Camarasaurus got its share of myths because of the air cavities in its skull. It looked so suspicious that some people decided it shot gas as a weapon. The reality, as always, is more boring. It just helped reduce the weight of its head. Kentrosaurus is another hero of myths. It had spikes on its butt, so someone fantasized that they could be used to shoot. And this was written by serious people with scientific degrees. And then there was Pachycephalosaurus. According to legend, they fought each other with their heads for a female. Some fought so hard that they woke up in a different geological era, as fossils. Incidentally, it is thanks to these fossils that we now know that their skulls were not that strong, and if they did fight, it was not for long. But most of all, we love to make up stories about predators. Tyrannosaurus rex is a name everyone knows. It has become a symbol of strength, aggression, and dominance. In movies, it is the main monster. In museums, it is the star attraction. And most people think it is the pinnacle of predator evolution. But the reality is a little different. There is a theory that T-Rex did not always kill on its own, but often just finished off the carcasses left by others. Its bite and skull structure were more suited to breaking bones than to quick attacks. Perhaps it was not attracted by the smell of blood, but by the smell of carrion. But even if it was the case, it was excellent at what it did, just a little less epic than in the Hollywood version. Ceratosaurus, on the other hand, tried to be epic. A horn on its nose, teeth like knives. It looks cool, but its body tells a different story. A long, flexible tail, a narrow body, and a weak jaw. All this proves that despite its large size, it most likely hunted only small dinosaurs rather than attacking large sauropods. In fact, it may have used its horn more for posing than for fighting. Beautiful, but ineffective. Another one is Allosaurus. In pop culture, it is the top predator before the appearance of T-Rex. And indeed, it had no real competitors in the Jurassic period. But interestingly, there is a hypothesis that its jaw worked like an axe. It did not grab, but quickly chopped downwards, inflicting deep, but not always fatal wounds. For a king, this is a very unusual method. It's closer to a butcher than a hunter. At this level, dinosaurs are not failures. They are just a little overrated. They have been embellished by Hollywood producers to make them easier for us to sell. But here, we will talk about dinosaurs which evolution hastily molded from whatever was available. And that would be fine if it didn't work, and many of them didn't survive precisely because of these absurd decisions. Carnotaurus is one of the strangest predators of its time. Despite its menacing name, its front limbs were not just short, they were fucking tiny and completely non-functional. To compensate, it had strong legs and a skull structure that could provide better stereo vision. It also had well-preserved skin and protrusions on its back. It could look like it was wearing leather armor, visually impressive, tactically not so much. Mononychus, on the other hand, was small but had a single huge clawed phalanx on its front limb. Evolution had honed it so much for a single purpose, digging or breaking termite mounds, that the rest of its limbs became mere appendages. But the darkest element of this level is Majungasaurus, a medium-sized predator from Madagascar with one unique feature: cannibalism. Clear traces of its teeth have been found on the remains, not on prey, on other Majungasaurus specimens. This is not just a theoretical assumption, it is documented behavior. When there was no food left, it ate its own kind. And if you think it couldn't get any more disgusting, wait until level 6. There we'll talk about herbivores that changed the climate just by farting. Well, the next dinosaurs became iconic not because of their evolution, but thanks to Hollywood. Movies made them stars, but to do so, they completely changed their appearance to make them look better on screen. Ironically, in reality, these animals were even more terrifying, just not as cinematic. In movies, it's a 2-meter-tall killing machine that opens doors and spins its head like a predatory dog. In reality, the Velociraptor was about the size of a turkey, but its feathers weren't just for decoration. It was an animal closer to a bird than a reptile. Some researchers suggest that Dromaeosaurids, the group to which Velociraptor belongs, may have had salivary glands that produce mildly toxic substances. This would have allowed them to paralyze small prey or slow down larger ones. There is also reason to believe that Velociraptor ate bones, not just meat, bones, and that puts it closer to hyenas with sharp claws and poison. The same cannot be said for Dilophosaurus, which was made poisonous in Jurassic Park, with a crest on its neck that opened like an alien frog. In reality, it had neither a hood nor poison, but its real skull speaks for itself. It was extremely thin. How thin? Thin enough to break from its own bite if not careful. Some paleontologists believe that it did not hunt on its own, but specialized in intimidation or even fed on fish. A fisherman with soft jaws instead of a predator with toxic glands. But you have to admit, such a dinosaur would hardly have become a movie star. Compsognathus. In movies, it's a pack of small predators that kill a child in seconds. In the Lost World, they look like a mixture of gremlins and piranhas created specifically to scare people. But the real Compsognathus could have been even more terrifying. It is one of the first completely preserved dinosaur skeletons, thanks to which science began to seriously consider the evolutionary link between dinosaurs and birds. But the most interesting thing is that a completely swallowed lizard was found in its stomach, entirely, without any tissue damage. This means that Compsognathus didn't just kill, it swallowed its prey alive. It had extremely high metabolism and had to hunt constantly to survive. This wasn't random aggression, but a food obsession. And if we consider theories about temporary social behavior, Compsognathus may not have hunted alone, so the film did not exaggerate. It simply showed one version of what could well have been reality. Now, let's move on to those who did not hunt, but could still kill. Not just a single creature, but the climate of an entire planet. If you still think that long-necked creatures were cute, gentle giants, you are mistaken. They were the real terrorists of the Mesozoic era, and they didn't need to crash into tall Araucaria trees or marry their friends' children to do so, but they certainly terrorized the entire planet with their farts. In the 2000s, a hypothesis emerged that initially sounded like a joke, that sauropods, the largest herbivorous dinosaurs, could have influenced the climate, not through their activity or some kind of catastrophe, but simply because they released methane into the atmosphere, a lot of methane. In 2012, scientists at John Moores University in Liverpool estimated that the entire population of sauropods, such as Brachiosaurus, Argentinosaurus, and Apatosaurus, could have produced up to 520 million tons of methane per year. That's about the same amount that human industry releases today. One brachiosaurus could generate as much methane as 400 modern cows, and there were millions of these brachiosaurs. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. It is enough to raise temperatures, change ecosystems, and accelerate extinction. Imagine the effect when there are millions of such living factories on the planet, and they eat hundreds of kilograms of plants every day, which slowly ferment in their 5-chambered stomachs. These animals had no claws, did not hunt, and did not fight, but they could have caused climate change that altered ecosystems for millions of years and destroyed many living organisms. The only thing that saved the planet from the destruction of all life was that it was not covered by a big, giant blanket. And after such a highly intellectual joke, I think you are ready for Level 7 dinosaurs, the most dangerous and terrifying. Let's start with Spinosaurus, because frankly, you've been waiting for it anyway. A 15-meter predator with a crocodile-like jaw, a sail on its back, and the ability to swim like a giant semi-aquatic killer. But the scariest thing is not its appearance, but the conclusion made by scientists. Spinosaurus may have lost the ability to move effectively on land. Its hind limbs were so short and weak that some paleontologists suggest it was already on its way to becoming a fully aquatic predator. This means that for the first time in 100 million years of evolution, one of the theropods could have completely abandoned land. And when scientists first saw the fossil of Therizinosaurus, one of them simply lit a cigarette in the laboratory without saying a word, because what they saw before them did not fit into any classification. Therizinosaurus looks like something created by accident. Its claws are a meter long, the largest claws of any land animal in history. Formerly, it was herbivorous, but there is still no single answer as to why it had such weapons. One option is defense, another is aggressive display, but there is another, less comfortable option. There is a hypothesis that these claws were used not only for defense, but also as a tool for dismembering carcasses. The herbivorous Therizinosaurus could behave like an opportunistic scavenger, tearing carcasses to pieces and eating what was left after the real predators. That did not make it a carnivore, but it did add something hyena-like to its reputation. Megaraptor is another anomaly. Despite its name, it has nothing to do with raptors. It is not the intelligent predator with a feather on its tail that is depicted in books. It is a separate, less understood line of theropods that went a different way, not through jaw muscles like Tyrannosaurus, but through its front legs. Its claws, over 30 centimeters long, are almost like those of Therizinosaurus. But unlike it, Megaraptor was not herbivorous. It was a real butcher, and one of the few that specialized not in biting, but in tearing its prey apart with its hands. Some paleontologists believe that it killed not as a predator, but as an executioner. It tore its prey to pieces before eating it. Its skull was disproportionately small, and its jaws were not as massive as those of other giants of the Cretaceous period. But this only reinforces the image. Instead of biting, Megaraptor worked with its hands. In a sense, it was the anti-T-Rex. And finally, Thanatotheristes. The name translates from Greek as one who gathers the dead, or reaper of death, not because it looked like a skeleton with a scythe, but because of the anatomy of its skull. Elongated, pointed at the front, with massive teeth and a pronounced crest resembling an axe. It lived about 80 million years ago, 10 million years earlier than T-Rex. Although it was slightly smaller than T-Rex, some features made it more dangerous. It is believed that Thanatotheristes may have been faster and, when hunting in packs, deadly effective. Teeth marks found on the remains of prey indicate controlled, methodical tearing. This is not typical of the chaos associated with large predators. The Thanatotheristes' skull had a unique structure, with a high nasal crest and powerful jaws that functioned more like a meat grinder than scissors. However, it never appeared in Jurassic Park or in any normal script.